T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Kush'S Korner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight is a bit of a casual episode. Alex Myers is back once again, and we're kind of going to be going over our plans for the 2025 breeding season, the species that we have in the pipeline, our plans for cycling, incubation, all that good stuff. But before we get into that, as always, USARC. So USARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to pursue this way of life. Check out usarc.org for all of the relevant information you need to know about the organization. And if you are not already, please look into becoming a member. As a community, we have strength in numbers, so the more people we have behind the cause, the better. And we are brought to you by Mark Bailey Reptiles. Mark Bailey is an OG of the reptile industry, someone who I'm very proud to call a friend and a mentor. He has been doing it at the highest level for decades at this point, both in the reptile and the rodent industry. And these days, he is leading the way in the field of designer ball pythons. He's been doing ball pythons longer than most people have known what ball pythons are. So check out Mark Bailey Reptiles for all of the highest end, most cutting edge ball pythons available in the market today. And we are also brought to you by Blake's Exotic Feeders. If you are here in the United States and are looking for quail to feed to your reptiles, please check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. They hand raise everything in their facility here in the United States, so you know you're getting a good quality product from a good US-based source. Once again, for feeder quail, check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. And we are also brought to you by the Reptile Perch. David Brahms is the one who innovated the 3D printed reptile perch idea in the industry that has been replicated a number of times, but there is nothing like the OG. Check out the Reptile Perch for all of their tub kits, enclosure designs, everything. And he also breeds designer green tree pythons. So if that is your cup of tea, check out David Brahms and the Reptile Perch for not only perches, but for designer green tree pythons. And here we are. Thank you to everybody who is tuned in live currently. And thank you to everybody who is listening after the fact, both on YouTube and on any of the audio platforms. Please give us a subscribe here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network YouTube channel. There's a new podcast every single day of the week from a long list of some of the best hosts in the game. There's never a shortage of the highest quality reptile audio and video content for your viewing pleasure. Also, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you get your podcast. 5-star reviews, all of that good stuff. Anything you guys can do will greatly help out all of us here at the channel. So here we are, another week in the books, episode 30, which is pretty crazy. It was right around a year ago, I think, when MJ reached out with the idea of getting something back going with the podcast after a significant break from the old unfiltered days, and kind of one thing led to the next, and now here we are, and we are 30 episodes deep. So I guess without further ado, let's bring in Alex. What's going on?
Doing pretty good, man. Always happy to talk reptiles, especially, on the coolest reptile podcast in the world, as you say. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a last minute snafu in the scheduling. So Alex was very kind to donate his time tonight on very short notice. So I greatly appreciate that, because I don't know many people I can call who would answer that and be like, yeah, let's do it. I'm good. So
on one hand, it's just, I enjoy, like I said, talking reptiles, but I've never actually done a podcast before where I get to talk about breeding plans. So I figured, why not? I can hopefully share some insight on what I do with the lizards I work with, and some insight and ideas that I have for some of the new species that I'll be attempting to breed next year. And who knows, if it just keeps the conversation going and helps somebody else out listening, why not?
It's also kind of, I feel like, a cool benchmark for us to kind of look back on at some point and, you know, see how the evolution of our thought process has worked on the different species that we're doing, because, you know, we're not the first people who are working with some of these rare species, but there's not, you know, there's not a cut and dry cookie cutter method to it, because otherwise you would see captive bred sailfin dragons and scrub pythons and tiger rat snakes and, you know, water dragons all over the country. And you don't, you know, so it's definitely important stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, any insight we bring up hopefully just encourages other people to tweak things, adjust things. I mean, I can tell you, every year I've produced Chinese water dragons. It's never been the same cookie cutter recipe, as you said. You know, I'm hopeful that this year will yield better results than the past couple of years. It'll be hard to beat the ones before that, though. So again, just trying to not stay, like, you know, in the same stuck mindset of, okay, cool, I got it once and now I'm just going to keep going and going and going. But
sure,
tweaking it to try and, I guess, perfect the recipe, you know, ball pythons, corn snakes, like you were saying, anything that breeds with that, you know, easy guide of how to do X. Those people had to start somewhere with those. You know, somebody had to figure out you had to brumate corn snakes. Somebody figured out you had to do whatever for ball python. I don't breed ball pythons all the time, so I don't know what the main trick is to them. But clearly, a lot of people do it, and somebody had to figure that out. And
yeah,
who knows, maybe again, it's podcasts like this talking about scrub pythons, or MJ's segment on the arboreals, or Mike Stefani's podcast on monitors. Everybody's got something to say. Everybody's got something to share, and hopefully it'll start improving the success of those who are trying to, you know, breed something that's not as easy, and making it easy for other people to learn from.
Yeah.
I worded that horribly, but, you know,
no, I don't at all. So I guess with that said, where are you at right now with the approach and the, you know, we're obviously coming up on breeding season. Where's your mental state at? Where are you with your animals? Kind of what's your current situation?
With the water dragons, at least on my end, the first thing I do is I put them through, I guess you could call it a pseudo hibernative state. Okay. So they don't hibernate, but they experience change. And so typically that's associated by just cutting the lights back. And I try and have that fall during my winter. So the days are shorter, meaning in the wild it's naturally going to be a little bit cooler. Since the house here, you know, it's cooler as well. In a sense, they just sort of experience, instead of a daytime high of 90 degrees, daytime high is around 75 and the nighttime low. I've had it get as low as, you know, 60, kind of whatever the place sits at. I like to crack my windows just so I get fresh air in at night. And just they start to drop. They don't eat as much. The males especially, I don't really attempt to feed. I just, you know, the food bowls that I leave out, they'll pick off roaches. And for the females, I might tongue feed them an earthworm or a superworm or something to give them a little bit of that, like, fat calorie boost. So that way, once they're ready to start their reproductive events next year, they've got the energy stores to do that. But the males, you know, I'm trying, last year, I know specifically, I never really attempted to even tongue feed my main male that was doing the breeding, and he got skinny, and I think that's fine. Like, let him sort of lean out, so then when it warms up, he's, you know, lean, mean, and ready to breed. The reality is, you know, fat lizards don't breed too often or too well in captivity, especially in my experience with the water dragons. You'll see a lot of people who are just feeding them mice, and they get fat and they get really lethargic. Like, that animal's not going to want to breed, you know. And so I've sometimes been critiqued saying, you know, your animals are skinny, they're unhealthy, but you know, I'm trying to, you know, 2020 was definitely the year where I know I had multiple clutches with 100% fertility from a skinny, underweight male. No, he just got the job done. And I'd like to think, you know, looking at his body morphology compared to animals I've seen photos of in the wild, you know, iNaturalist is what I try and reference. And you can see, like, when it's during sort of their cool down period, I mean, it's drier, and colder, and the animals kind of look miserable. And obviously we don't want them to be miserable in captivity, but I feel like, and again, I'm just using this for my case of breeding these water dragons, where if I don't make them go through that, I'm almost wondering if that would push back their will to breed. You're just making it too easy on them. They don't know if next year is going to be better or worse. So this year was all right, and therefore they're going to want to breed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like across the board, I feel like almost all adult reptiles and an adult, and that's quite a qualifier for me, really benefit from cyclical seasonal feeding. I mean, I can't think of any reptile that doesn't, and obviously there's a lot of conversation, I feel like, surrounding like equatorial species, where it's like, okay, what kind of temperature cycle are you going to put this animal through, considering that in the wild they really don't. But that also doesn't mean that they don't have seasonal fluctuations that manifest in other ways. And oftentimes, especially with like bird eating species, or I'm not even like primarily bird eaters, but anything that will eat birds, with migratory patterns and whatnot, or prey will be available and then suddenly not available. So yeah, it's cool to hear that you do that with your water dragons. Are you changing the content of the diet, or just the frequency when you're doing the cool down?
Just the frequency for now.
Yeah. Okay.
If anything, maybe they get more roaches than say superworms, and that's just because the roaches sort of slow down in the winter, so I try to feed off all of my excess adults. So I guess you could almost say it's like mimicking that baby insect boom, because the roaches are just kept in tubs at the temperature of the reptile room. So in the summer they're going to breed faster, it's warmer, slow down in the winter. So it's almost like in the winter the lizards are eating less, but they're eating more adult prey items. And then as it warms up and the roaches go through another, baby boom, again, the roaches breed all year round, but typically once, the production really increase, then I'm going through a lot more mediums and smalls. And so instead of an adult female Chinese water dragon eating 1 to 2 adult roaches twice a week, now they're eating every other day, and they might be slamming, 15, 20 small roaches. And, it's sort of like smaller food items on a much more frequent basis. But
yeah,
that would be the only comparison, because I try to feed a variety of things to them. Unlike snakes, which, like I've got pet corn snakes, they really only eat mice, and I've started throwing some chicks in there. But for the most part, they were raised on mice. Like, they seem to be fine on that. But with the lizards, they definitely seem to have, like, I don't want to anthropomorphize, but say they get somewhat bored. If you keep feeding them the same thing over and over again, they seem to just lose that drive, where if one day they're getting an earthworm, they're ready for that. And then you starve them for a couple days, and okay, there's a big bowl of roaches, they run down. Crickets, they'll chase across the enclosures. You'd be amazed at how accurately, a 3-foot male water dragon can pounce on a large cricket. It's quite impressive. And then I said that's just sort of what I try to do with them. But for the most part, I'd say it's an unintentional food cycle there. It's more I'm trying to focus on the frequency.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Are you then, once your cooling period is over and they're brought back up, are you then subsequently increasing the food and then seeing breeding activity follow that?
It's usually more like around the end of the cooling period. And in a sense, where they come from, they're just north of the equator. So in the case of the Chinese water dragon, it's, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. So they get about a 3 to 4 month dry season, and then the other 7 to 8 months of the year is rain. And so what I've noticed is that when I've kept them together, they actually breed earlier, but it's always near the end of that dry spell. Whereas before, especially when I was in high school, I really was just trying to dial in a pair. I would throw the male in at the start, and he would breed because he was deprived of being with a female. But it was interesting seeing this sort of cohabitative behavior where the male picked up on the female cycles. And to me, that said that I was missing her cycle early on. But from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense. They want to mate at the end of the dry season. So the first clutch and second clutch ideally are laid early
Sure.
during that 8-month wet season, about 60 days incubation, maybe a little bit longer or shorter in the wild. I personally don't know of any data on wild incubation times, but the point is that the babies in theory would hatch in the middle of that rainy season. So say 4 or 5 months in, maybe less, and then they have 3 to 4 months to bulk up, eat all the, insects, and then ideally survive the upcoming dry season.
Okay. So do you not always have them cohabbed throughout this process?
That's sort of what I'm experimenting with right now.
Okay.
It's a lot easier to keep individual lizards separate when you have, 1 or 2 lizards, or even 3, like I was doing at the end of college. But now that I'm building up my groups to have trios and, 1 male and 3 females, everybody's just living together for the sake of saving on some cage space. Because I also want to have setups that are just empty. You never know if somebody's going to fight. So I could either have a ton of smaller setups for individual animals, or I could go with some bigger setups, keep a group in there, and if female Y is bullying female Z, then I just pull female Y out for a month and then reintroduce them. So that's what I'm very curious about for this upcoming season, is if I will once again see that I will get eggs earlier than I've normally done when I keep them separate and then pair, or if, who knows, maybe these are me totally different individuals. I moved upstate too. So is the barometric pressures during winter going to throw them off? It's hard to say. That's sort of where I'm waiting to take some notes on that. But I have a feeling, my gut is telling me that regardless of when they breed, it will be sometime before March. And then eggs should be laid March through August.
How do you feel like the lizards have been settling into the new place with the move and everything? Kind of in terms of breeding, what are your observations on your animals?
Some of them are slower to eat to start. So one thing that I want to make note of, the remaining lizards that I am yet to pick up, I'll be getting from friends at the upcoming Tinley weekend. But I do have some water dragons that I've moved up here now, and a couple of sailfins, and they've been doing pretty well. The biggest thing that stood out to me was they're going from one environment they've known for a few years, and they're totally having that changed up on them. And they definitely, I don't know how to describe it. It's like they're eating, but they're not eating with gusto. Like a lizard, as soon as you put that plate of salad in there, it's jumping down. Destroying that food. It's sort of, you put the plate in there and they stare at you. You don't really hear them moving, and then you close the enclosure. And as soon as you're out of the equation, then maybe you hear them run down. But even then, they're for example, the Paracelabensis sailfins I've got, they don't fully clean out their plates. Sometimes they do, but it's not as consistent. Whereas back in Illinois, the sailfins that are there, you put a plate of food in there, it's gone by the end of the day. It doesn't matter how big it is. They're just gluttons, right? They're established, they're comfortable, and they're ready to rock and kick butt. So I won't be surprised if I see more of that with the animals that I pick up from Tinley. But I'm kind of curious, because Tinley's near that time frame where they'd start already picking up on the place getting a bit cooler before I even cut the daylight. So who's to say? Either way, I'm hoping it'll be kind of nice that they will arrive here. They're past the breeding season for this year, and then that way they get a few months to transition to next year's breeding season.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely, I feel like that's the right time to get them as well. To where you're not having to worry about females that are still cycling through infertile clutches or this or that. You're not missing anything, but then also you have the opportunity to let them kind of chill out before getting right to it. This time of year seems like the best time to move reptiles overall. For the most part, this is when I moved last year, roughly. So it seems like if you're gonna do it, you probably found the right time to do it.
It's kind of what I was thinking, honestly. Took a little bit of inspiration from you on that. I remember you were telling me how you were moving out to Texas. I was like, well, just so happens that by next year, I will very likely be needing to move my lizards. And so I was hoping to do it in March, and I did for the handful of lizards that I have here.
Yeah.
And as you said, with infertile eggs, I did have a sailfin lay 2 clutches here, all infertiles though.
Yeah.
But I do think the first clutch she was gravid from the guy that I got her, or just going through a cycle. She's young. She was a 2020 or 2021 import, so she she's 2022 import. My bad. So right coming up on that. Ideally, people say they mature sexually at 3 to 5 years, which surprised me because I mean,
seems long, huh?
Yeah, I imagine the ecology of the sailfins is more like Cyclura. They're a bigger, long-lived agamid. Most people don't breed Cyclura until they're almost 7 to 10 years. So some of the agamid lizards, I know water dragons. I've had customers send me updates of babies I produce cycling infertile eggs at 8 months if you raise them right, which is insane.
That's
Yeah. Typically it's about 18 months with the Chinese water dragons. And even then, I personally wouldn't suggest breeding one until they're 2. Like, let her have a couple test runs, make sure the system's up and running. And so part of me wonders if that's the case with them. It's just so hard because so few people breed sailfins, and a lot of the people that acquire young sailfins, especially in this case the Celebensis, they've been coming in now for a couple of years. You can buy a juvenile for about $300. I honestly just wouldn't be surprised if the husbandry of some of those people, and I'm not trying to sound I'm such a better caretaker, not from a high tower of elitism or anything like that, but it's lizards that are being sort of sold and kept in small fish tanks that they reach 2 years old, but they're still stunted and small. Whereas, this female, she was raised pretty well by the man I got her from. And she's just doing her thing. And it was pretty cool to see that. So hopefully next year she could, in theory, breed. But honestly, that's all got to come down to the male that's with her, because he's a lot smaller than she is. Did
you have the male at the time, or is this an animal that you acquired later on?
I got them as a pair. Shout out to Brian Waterloo. He was downsizing. He told me he wanted to make some room for his lace monitor projects that he was working on. And he's got some other hobbies too. And he says, hey, trying to move these sailfins, I think you should take them on. And so we organized shipping and stuff. And they came up here in May of this year. So it was really exciting. The Celebensis, for anybody watching the video, that's the species I've got as my green screen. That's, in my opinion, probably my favorite looking sailfin, but it is also hard to beat the blue and purple on a Pustullatus. So it's hard to say, but Brian wanted to make sure they would be worked with. And I'd like to think 2 clutches of eggs of her being here is a good sign. So hopefully next year the boy catches up in size. He just had a big shed. I should try and upload a photo of him on Instagram or something, but man, he hates me. I open up that tent and he shoots to the top. So he's a bit of a nutcase, but his dorsal spikes on his neck have got some teal in them, which is pretty cool, which I had never seen on like a Celebensis in person. I've seen images of it, but you never know if people are like editing photos or something just to get like
Sure. Okay. So how many species of sailfin dragon will it be that you can attempt this coming year?
Just 2.
Okay.
The unfortunate, I mean, it's cool because sailfins, they're the largest of the agamid lizards. They get around 3 feet total length, 3.5 feet for the larger species. So you need really big enclosures. So I only have room. I'll have 5 adults by Tinley, and so I will. I've got the Paracelebensis here, and then I'll be picking up. I've got 2 female Pustullatus I'm currently working with, and I am working out on getting a male at Tinley. So then I'll be set up with a big trio then, and we'll see what happens for next year.
So it'll be two Philippine females, and then the one Celebensis female.
Yeah, 2. Yeah, so 3 females, 2 males, 2 species.
Okay. How's the cycling on them going to be in comparison to the water dragons?
I have no idea. I'm hoping with I took notes because the Philippine girls did lay infertile clutches this year for me. Both of them laid 2 clutches. Pretty sure one of them laid 3. Issue is I was on vacation when I was pretty sure she was going to lay. And so since the caretaker comes by only for a short period. I'm pretty sure she laid her eggs and then she ate them, which, they're infertiles. Because I remember, like, before I left, I went to Alaska earlier in August, and she looked full. You could see her hip bones. The back of her head was shrunken, and she was showing all the signs that she was gravid. When I came back, her lower third of her body looked like a, empty tube of toothpaste.
Yeah.
And to me, she had to have laid. There was dirt kicked everywhere out of her nest box. Dug around, there were no eggs though. So
yeah, sure.
To me, and I've heard they do that sometimes. When sailfins are weird. When they lay infertile eggs, they kind of just scatter them everywhere. Like I was talking to Scott and Casey about that, and that's what they were telling me, is that especially for first-time females, sometimes the first 2 to 5 clutches, they'll just find an egg on a basket. Like, they just poop them out. It's so weird. And then once they actually get a good fertile clutch, they do the full digging routine, which, again, I think it's just sort of weird to be experiencing that. I did have the female Celebensis this year. She did dig and bury one of her clutches of eggs, but they were definitely duds, really yellow and squishy. So who's to say? Like I said, that's just part of the routine of me trying to figure them out. But from the notes that I've taken, they seem to be laying on average about every 6 weeks.
Okay.
And
so I almost feel like, from like an initial thought process, that like if they have their ideal nesting spot kind of picked out, that they wouldn't want to put their infertile eggs there, because then they just have like desiccating egg mass where they want their pristine eggs to be. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it's definitely possible. Part of me wonders too if it was just a case of, like I wasn't home during that time, so maybe the nest box dried out a little bit too quickly. That's one of the things that's been interesting about working with the sailfins, is I like to do big nest boxes, but in my experience, they aren't like veranids. So, like when I was working at RepTech or at the facility I curate right now, we've got a blue tree monitor female where I set up a nest box, and she's due to lay soon, and I've seen her in there digging. The sailfins don't really seem to, but again, in my experience, utilize like a hole in a nest box. So I've got these big 45-gallon tubs, all open top. And so they evaporate kind of quickly.
Sure.
And so unless you're in there intentionally spraying the nest box down when you're hosing down the cage, you leave that for a couple of days. That top layer dries out. And if the female's testing it and she thinks this is dry, which again would have been the case when I was in Alaska.
Yeah, sure.
That's why I wonder. Might have been why she ate the eggs too. It's hard to say, but the point is that if they follow a cycle like this year, I would like to imagine locks for them will be in January, and then every 6 weeks from there. So eggs in March, May, July.
Okay. And that's typically what you see is 3 clutches in those intervals.
I'd like to imagine that. I've only gotten 2, like I said, 2 clutches that I can confirm from every female that I've currently got. But again, they're younger. Sure. Casey Schultz has told me she's had up to 5 clutches a year from her Philippine pair, infertile, so unfortunately right now. But I know her pair is older, her main pair, I should say. Sure. Funny actually that I mentioned her. She texted me today that she had a clutch of 4 infertile eggs from a female Philippine, different unrelated bloodline she's working with. But it's it's hard to say. And ironically, those were infertile eggs that were fully buried. So it's almost like they know they're bad eggs or something. I wish I understood that aspect more, but I'm just happy that I'm at least getting eggs. And I'm hoping by having, at least in the case of the Philippine girls, a nice big male in the equation. It's going to be a 7-year-old. He's about 40 inches. So he'll hopefully get the job done.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting, man. I'm hopeful, because this is I feel like it's a long time coming, for you to get to this point of finally being able to have your first real attempt at it.
I hope so. I mean, I was talking with a really successful basilisk breeder. His name's Eric Haycraft. And like one thing that he said is because he bred basilisks, he's bred like the Corytophanes cristatus, the helmeted basilisk, and he's bred Lomanthes. They're all within that same gene like family, And
Okay.
pretty much, I was asking, I'd like to work with basilisks one day. And he literally said, if you can figure out one species, you can pretty much figure out all of them. You just have to make adjustments. And so, I mean, the fact that I've got infertile eggs from sailfins, and I know I can breed, I've been breeding water dragons since 2018. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking, like you were saying, I just need to get a good male in there, and let's give it a shot, right? That's
Yeah.
the goal. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
very excited, though.
Well, good. Yeah. I mean, I just imagine a year of, multiple sailfin clutches and multiple water dragon clutches swimming in little babies over there.
Oh yeah, water dragons especially, but it's worth it. I mean, like, so I'm very fortunate that I haven't been the most active on social media lately, but the small following of water dragon enthusiasts that like to follow my work, I've had people wait 2 years to buy lizards from me, and these people do their research. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking now with this Chinese water dragon specifically, they've got their updated CITES appendix status that'll really help wean out some of the people that were trying to lowball back in the day. It is difficult to sell
Sure.
water dragons like on a large scale for most people. And, as a small hobbyist breeder at the time, through high school and then through college, only producing 4 or 5 clutches a year, it's sort of, you can usually sell that and the right people find me, but occasionally I get the one person that only wants a captive bred water dragon because they think it won't die as fast as the wild caught one they still shoved in a fish tank. So that'll hopefully not be the case this year, but nonetheless, like I said, they're a lot of fun to hatch. And unlike sailfins, the water dragons seem to calm down more. I had and I still have her. I think I mentioned her on the last episode. I've got my old female water dragon. I've had her for 11 years. She used to go to reptile shows with me. I just have her out on a stick. Kids would pet her, so they can be socialized. I say that with a grain of salt. She's the only one to my knowledge that's pretty chill. Most of my other ones that are wild caught definitely do not like it when I mess with them. But I'll have to find a old video I took of one of my F1 babies that I hatched in 2020. It was 7 weeks old. I was just sitting in the enclosure, like waving my fingers at it, and it just walks right down on my hand. It's letting me scratch its chin. So I think, if they're raised up properly to where they realize you're not going to eat them right away, that they quite literally are sort of like not to sound terrible, a cooler bearded dragon. They have that potential, but you have to get past that initial flightiness.
Sure.
But I wouldn't say they're as flighty as a sailfin or as the basilisk species I mentioned that Eric works with. Yeah. So, like I said, a lot of potential, and I'm just really looking forward to hatching out some hopefully next year.
Yeah, I feel like they can fill that niche of kind of like what a lot of people want a monitor lizard to be, like a smaller monitor, but in a more manageable package. Yeah, I mean, because I obviously, we both know well, for as many times as you'll see videos online of monitors being puppy dogs, for every one of those, you got a decent amount that, without all the work that went into that animal, are just little terrors. So I feel like that, like the water dragons can kind of fit that niche of a bigger, beautiful, more impressive, but still pretty calm pet lizard.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. They're cool. I mean, that's why I was drawn to them. I mean, I don't even know how many times I've told the story, but pressed by sailfins, realized I couldn't afford one as a middle schooler, and found my way up to the $15 Chinese water dragon. That started a whole new passion and that's why I still work with them today, because they're just really cool.
Any aspirations to get Australians?
If I can do an outdoor setup, which where I moved to, I'm in Minnesota, so we're actually a lot lower in elevation than where I went to school in central Wisconsin. Okay. This is my first summer up here. It was really humid. So I think for Australian water dragons, because you have to cool them down, they got to go through an actual hibernation cycle. If anybody's familiar with Bert Langerworth, the founder of Australian water dragons, he kept his outside in Alabama year round. And there's photos. I'm almost done reading his autobiography, but there's photos of his facility with snow on top of the lizard enclosures.
Wow.
Because the lizards, he dug the terrarium to be below the frost line. So those lizards got down to 34 degrees, no problem. And then they just wake up. Obviously, the winters up here in Minnesota, when they're -30, that's probably lethal. But
You think?
I've sketched out some ideas of like doing a greenhouse that can be ventilated in the summer. So like say in the winter, when the sun shines on it, it'll stay in the 40s when outside is sub-zero, right?
Sure.
And then, but again, I need to actually have like a bigger property to do something like that. So there's plenty of great people working with Australian water dragons, though. I mean, I know Eddie Soto down in Florida. He's rocking with some really nice ones. My buddy Joe Giorgio, he's got some awesome Aussies. And then I want to say Ron St. Pierre and Heather Moy have got a small colony as well.
Right.
So I know they're shifting more towards blue tongue skinks from what I've seen on their pages, but there's good people working with Aussies, and I'm sure there are many more, even hobbyist level Aussie keepers, because I see a bunch of Aussies listed. So I'd like to think for everybody that has 10 groups of Aussies, there's going to be, someone like me in high school who lives where they can keep them outdoors, that maybe has a pair or two, and just, adding to keeping them around. But if I ever want to get Aussies, I want to do them right. And I just don't have the means to do that. I probably could keep them alive year round, but I don't think I can get them to breed.
Okay. It's the kind of thing where if you don't put them through that cycle, they just kind of sit there like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm sure there's probably some folks who have gotten them to breed that way. But it'd be no different than, say, I don't know, like, say, a zoo or something that has a pair of corn snakes together on exhibit that never hibernate, right? They'll breed like once every 3 years just randomly. But I want that consistency. And like we started this conversation, I think a lot of that comes down to having a proper cycle. And with the Chinese water dragons, that cycle doesn't need to be much, but it needs to be a distinct wet and dry season, hot and wet, cool and dry. For the Aussies, they need it cold or at least cooler. And I just don't think I can provide that indoors.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Definitely. It's always exciting to get to that time of year when stuff cools down and dries out and goes off feed.
Yeah. It saves me a little bit of time, but it's a weird conundrum on my end, because I'm like, man, I feel like I shouldn't be this relaxed. And then baby season hits and you're always working. So it's how it goes. But that's part of the breeding hobby. So yeah, it's fun. And like I said, I'm really hoping I won't be changing too much, but with these changes that I'm going to attempt to do, I'll be able to learn something new, at least in regards to working with the water dragons, and ideally be sharing it with all y'all. So for anybody listening that's looking to breed water dragons, hopefully this has piqued some ideas for you.
Hell yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm happy that probably in the next couple of weeks, all the rattlesnakes are going to start shutting down. And then next month will be colubrids and scrubs will be off of feed. And I'm just going to be kind of coasting for a little while. It's going to be nice.
Oh yeah. What are so I guess I discussed my lizard breeding plans. Let's go with I like colubrids. So what do you have lined up for next year?
Yeah. So definitely more than last year. Hopefully more than just one clutch of Mexican pine snakes. But I would say my main focus would be getting the Spilotes to all kind of get in line. I got a bunch of infertile eggs last year. I think I got 3 clutches of infertile eggs. So that was the furthest I had gotten. That was kind of like, I kind of half-assed tried breeding them 2 years prior. But now I have them in what I consider proper enclosures and everything. So I'm more hopeful for those. So it'll be 2 pairs of Mexicanus, a Veracruz locality pair, then a Yucatan locality pair, and then the South American Pilatus, Suriname, Guyana locality, whatever you want to say. And then they should be ready to go, the pair of Sulfuris. So the female is definitely, she's big. She's probably over 8 feet now. not as big as they can get, but I think plenty big enough to breed. The male, he's been a slower grower for me, but right now I don't have that pair together. I have the other 3 pairs cohabbed, and I'm going to put them through a bit of a cooling period starting pretty soon, to kind of not a full cool down, but chill them out a little bit, reduce food pretty significantly, and kind of bring it back around in like January. Because that's kind of when I started to see a lot of activity last year with them, and I put them through a little bit of a cycle, but not much, and they weren't in proper enclosures, and it just wasn't what I would have liked it to be. So my plan is to keep that male sulfurous up during that cooling period and feed them, try to get them to grow. And for some reason with the sulfurous in particular this male, he seems to not react well to big meals, and frequent smaller meals seem to be much more tolerable for him. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing, kind of like a multiple time a week feeding until it's time to breed. He's got a big head. He's like, he has adult proportions, just kind of like a thinner body. So I just think he needs a little bit extra bulk on him. The females, she's more than fine. She'll eat a medium rat and it'll look like nothing was in her. So nothing quite like Roy's animals where he feeds them large rats, but he also has much older animals than I do. So one day I'll have giant sulfurous eating large rats. But then aside from the spilotes, the Mexican pines, obviously once again I will be breeding, and then Cameron Highland locality cave racers, the Ridley Eye. You are muted.
I know. Yeah, I've got some noise in the background coming from my AC unit, so I don't want that to be picking up. But yeah, I'm listening.
Yes. Okay, so those, the Ridley Eye, Cameron Highland locality type, and then at least one female Kankakee bull snake, if not maybe a couple younger ones. I'm gonna try to cycle them anyway. They're 2021, so for Pituophis standards, they should be ready to breed. They're significantly smaller than my proven adult female that I just acquired this year, and I don't want to push them harder than I need to. I would potentially be pairing up my Trans-Pecos rat snakes, but I haven't been able to find a damn male for them. So I was sold a pair that ended up being 2 girls. Not the worst problem in the world, but then when you can't find a male all year, then you're kind of like, well, this sucks. So I'm if anyone out there has a adult male Trans-Pecos rat snake at this point, really of almost any type, let me know, because I've been looking. So I'm thinking of what else.
Does that include the Xanthic you have from Rob, the Subok?
Yeah, that's the pair.
Nice.
So it's an Xanthic het blonde and then an Xanthic blonde.
Wonderful.
So ideally I'd like a male that lines up genetically with those, but because I don't want to produce a bunch of like double het or het pos het, just for the sake of okay, yes, Brandon, I will give you your credit. You did send me a lot, but none of them like worked for the for the morphs of all of it. But at this point, I might just need to get one of those wild caught ones because shit's getting rough out here. But I mean, you may have one, and why don't you send me a mail, Brandon? You got some morph shit over there, just fucking hogging it all in Arizona. So, but yeah, so that's the Colubrid lineup for this year. So
no blue beauties.
No, unfortunately, I lost my adult female. Yeah, over a year ago, she randomly started having like, it almost was like some like weird like paralysis and like motor issues, and I couldn't really attribute it to anything. The male wasn't showing, and the male is fine. He's a little over 10 feet now. He's a monster. So I don't have any reason to suspect that there was anything viral wrong with her. So yeah, definitely a bit of a reset on the blue beauties. I have a female that is a little over a year old now that I'm putting the food to. So some point get back to producing blue beauties, but you know, we'll see. So
It's how it goes sometimes. Sorry for the
yeah,
long snake though. She was
yeah,
awesome.
it definitely did suck, but I haven't produced many colubrids, but when I have, I've had the bad habit of not holding on to anything from the clutches. So this year, definitely the Spilotes will be a different story because those are so uncommon, where a lot of the other species, they get bred regularly. Where I'll keep one or two back from Spilotes clutches if I get them. But then with the Mexican pines, my goal is to get a really nice holdback female next year, one that resembles the mom very much, or has some cool big blotchy pattern going on, or something like that. Just so that in case something happens, like with my beauty snake, that I'm not totally like shit out of luck on the line. So
For sure. It's a good Colubrid lineup though. I'm excited about those Ridley Eye. We're getting in a young trio of those at work.
okay,
And so
cool.
I'm flooded in blue beauty babies from this year's breedings. But so maybe I'll see if I can get one sent to you just so you can get some more blood in there. But then ours will be like the Malaysian, the non-orange Ridley.
Yeah.
But I'm still super excited because I remember seeing yours, and even the non-Highlands look phenomenal in my opinion. I always like the contrast of the blue in the back of the head just in that straight white snake. So that'll take a few years, but again, that's stuff for work. It's not part of my personal collection, but it's fun. And I mean, the whole Orthriomus genus is, in my opinion, one of the best groups of snakes you can keep. So sounds very exciting on the Spiloides front, though.
Yeah, I'm hopeful on those. Yeah, I have a young, like a 2-year-old female lowland Ridley Eye that I'm raising up as well. So slowly but surely with her, still have my big male that you saw from back in Chicago. So he's to my left right now, just doing his thing. So yeah, I like him. I definitely want to add Mollendorfi back into the mix at some point. They've gotten so damn expensive.
Oh, really? I haven't been paying attention to the prices on them.
Yeah, they're the 1,000-flower rat snake now, if you know what I'm saying. So
yikes. They're cool though.
No, I mean they're incredible snakes, so they're definitely worth it. But times are tough. Times are tough in the election year.
Yeah,
it's
all good. You'll get them eventually. That's what counts. So aside from colubrids, then I'm sure everybody who's listening that wants to hear your scrub python stuff, what are you lining up for next year? Are there specific pairings you're looking forward to? Are you going to try and do new species? I know you've got a group of Nada, right? Yeah. So what's
so this year? I mean, I feel like every year, and it should be this way, should be like this could be the year, and I've no reason to think it won't be, especially considering how many females I was able to get to cycle and lay last year, despite all of the problems that I had that I've discussed in previous episodes. Now that I feel like I've corrected a few problems, I hope that everything ends up just kind of taking another step in the right direction. But yeah, I'm definitely hoping to add species because so far I've only produced Amethystina, now be it 4 different locality types, which I'm thrilled with. I was able to add 2 new ones this year, 3 total with the Barnex. So, that was great. I'm definitely not complaining about that. So, but with that said, yeah, a number of Amethystina pairings, but I'll start off with the other stuff because the other 3 that are obviously available in the US, so non-Kinghorni I'm adding into the mix this year, where with Clastolepis, I've been attempting them for a few years now, and I've only gotten infertile eggs. And I was almost certain my female was gravid, in fact, last year, and she just looked really small. I figured she was going to slug out again. Somehow she ended up reabsorbing, and I'm honestly kind of glad she did. And I took the summer to really slim her out and try to get her into a better body condition for this breeding season. So that's like of everything I have, that's the number one for me this year is Clastolepis. If I can get a clutch of Moluccan scrub pythons, I will definitely be very happy this year. But then aside from that, also Halmaheras this will be like a really, I don't want to say I think I'm going to do it, but I think I've put myself in a position to where I couldn't be in a better position to do it, I guess. I have two decent size not older, but old enough females that I've raised from young. They're probably both about 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old, each about 8 feet long, 8.5 feet long. And then two smaller females that are both like around 7 feet that I may try, I may not. I'm just going to kind of see how they do. I'm going to cycle them. So, but I am planning on, I guess, to kind of preview us another topic. I'm going to be cycling some younger animals this year in ways that I haven't done in previous years, without necessarily the intention of trying to breed them. If they show me signs, I may give it a shot, but just to see if that kind of primes them for the next year or 2 years or whatever, to kind of being used to that cycle. So yeah, potential of 4 female Halmaheras, but 2 that are definitely like really ready to go. You can see one right here. She doesn't look so big, all coiled up, but that's what's the beauty of scrub pythons. And then Tannenbars as well. Just one adult female wild caught that I've had for about 1.5 years, a little over a year now, just barely over a year. And she's big. She put on size, so I'm confident that she has a shot. Bigger wild caught scrub pythons can be hit or miss, but I have successfully produced from some before, so it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. That would be amazing to get a clutch of Tannenbars.
You have all the Tannenbars are the one that have like the different, like there's xanthics and there's yellows and there's like, do you have each of the different combinations going into that, or are you just trying for like wild type? I'm not too familiar with. I know there's differences in them, and I've seen you post them. I just don't think I've seen yours in person.
Yeah. So yes, there are four phenotypes. There's basically a pattern mutation and a color mutation that are separate from each other. So there's either the heterozygous form, if we're using real genetic terms instead of reptile genetic terms, is the yellow or the xanthic, and then the homozygous form is the axanthic. And then there's the pattern mutation where the heterozygous form is the patterned. It's kind of like a dotted dash pattern, not very comparable to other scrub pythons, almost more of like a carpet python pattern in a way than a scrub python pattern. And then the homozygous form is the patternless. So with that said, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that the most common form is the double heterozygous, which where you would think the patterned xanthic, the patterned yellow, that actually is the most coveted and least available type. And then the double homozygous of the axanthic patternless is the most common. So most of the Tannenbars that are currently in the country are of the axanthic patternless variety. Brandon has a very nice axanthic patterned individual in his collection. And to my knowledge, I have the only xanthic patterned Tannenbar in the country right now, and he's an adult male, the primary one that I'm going to be attempting to breed this year. My adult female is patternless axanthic, so she's the double homozygous. But then if the genetics do work out the way we think they do, should be able to at least produce 1 or 2 of the yellow patterned animals from a clutch like that. I also do. So I have all 4 of the phenotypes present in my collection of both the combinations of the pattern and the color. So Lisa, to answer your question, especially after the episode I did with Eric back kind of in the spring, I would say like I would be looking for probably about like like 6 feet long or so. My girl's pretty big. She's probably closing in on 7 foot, and I've cut back her food significantly kind of because of that. The biggest tannenbar I've seen was a female that was like over 9 feet long, but she was also like 20 years old. So, the scrub pythons for sure, snakes in general, but definitely scrub pythons grow for a long time, just at a very slow but steady pace. But I would say the age is probably the same across the board, where realistically, especially after the episode with Daniel Natush, I would say for these captive animals, I don't see a reason why a female shouldn't be mature at 4 years old, especially if they're fed properly when they're young. From now having raised a number of scrub pythons, without question, the healthiest ones are ones that ate a lot of food when they were young, especially in the first year of life, and ones that were had food withheld from them. They grow slow, their proportions are weird, they're just strange animals and into a more mature phase of their life. So, but with that said, though, if I got a clutch of tannenbars, and historically speaking, they don't have very big clutches, unless it's super male heavy, I'd probably hold back the entirety of the first clutch and then just kind of see how that goes. So for example, this female right here, for those in the viewing audience, is a barneck from my first clutch that was in 2020. And although she doesn't look too big sitting in this 4x2x2 cage, she's 9 feet long, all stretched out. And I've gotten clutches from females that are significantly shorter in length than that, but were a little bit more filled out with age. So she and two of her siblings, along with some animals that are a year older, are going to be ones that I am going to cycle, but then will only pair if it seems like it's a good idea, especially considering how special these animals are to me, just on a personal level. I don't want to push them too young and run into complications. But also at the same time, if they are big enough and they are healthy, why not? That's what they're supposed to do. I think you are right that Eric said that his female was about 5 feet. And that part, like I was mentioning earlier, I just didn't articulate it particularly well. That part of that conversation, when he mentioned how big his female was, is why I cut back on my female, especially like I had her out. I'm like, oh, you're more than there. You're an adult snake. So, but I mean, so far, I don't see a reason to really treat them differently than the other scrubs. You just are accounting for the fact that they're significantly smaller. That's really about it. So we'll see. I'm excited for it. I'd love to have some little baby tannenbars. So that would be freaking awesome. So then those, now in total I'll be attempting all 4 species of scrubs this year, but then obviously plenty of amethystina pairings as well. For the barnecks to start, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but I have the potential for quite a few females, and females that to me are like the best of the best of mine. I think probably.
You don't mind me asking, just for the audience, when you're saying best of the best, are you doing for different morphotypes of the barneck, like was it the you have, and again, I apologize for not having the best scrub python background knowledge, but is it like the Prada? Do you have a Prada stock, right? Okay, I would say, yeah, and like that, are you breeding some for those higher dark bands? Are you breeding some for like the patternless neck? I remember I've seen your male that was like the quote unquote Manaquari. Like, are you trying to isolate some of those phenotypes in your captive stock now, or?
Absolutely. So, and good question. So and everybody who's listening who knows scrub pythons or is interested in scrub pythons knows that the heavy banded phenotype is the most in demand phenotype. And I produced some this year, but none that, other than 2 females, none that I intended to sell. And from one clutch I got 6 babies from, I mean, they're absolutely spectacular. So with that said, yeah, I mean, this year's availability will not be, aside from 2 females that I'm letting go, kind of heavily patterned animals. But next year, I think really all the pairings are going to be higher patterned pairings. And I have a pretty decent group of holdbacks now from the reduced pattern project of different lineages, and then a couple animals that popped up as reduced pattern from pairings that really shouldn't have thrown that, which is even more interesting to me. And especially because now that's just, brand new genetics that I can enter into those lines, just keep them stronger for a longer period of time. But yeah, that Prada line female is one that is definitely a very, very high priority for me. I would say, like, right behind the 3 other species. Like from an amethystina standpoint, it'd be hard for me to put another female over her as far as the like what snake that I'd want to go this year. And I think other people too, because I've had people who are like, oh, I'll wait until she produces. And I'm like, good luck if I'll sell any of them. But I can't blame you, because she's incredible. I have, so of captive bred lineages, that's the only Prada animal that I have. There aren't many really that are left out there. Obviously, Rob Christian has Janet and then her offspring. So the lineage carries on with Rob's collection. And then I believe Brandon Wheeler has an animal that he thinks is likely Prada line, but he can't necessarily trace it. The phenotype and the age and everything matches up with when animals were produced from the lineage, but he just can't prove it exactly from like a paper trail standpoint. So to have,
I didn't realize Rob's stuff was Prada. I mean, to be fair, whenever I talk with Rob, him and we have the same spider interests, so we keep a lot of the similar tarantula species. I guess I had never, sorry Rob if you're listening, I had never paid attention to the fact that that was Prada stock he had. Just because he's always making his Damn It Janet reference, which is to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is a great film. But yeah, I guess I had never put 2 and 2 together. That's pretty cool though.
Yeah, it is definitely cool. So it's great that he has that lineage and that it's going to continue on, especially with his holdbacks and everything like that. So other than that, the other captive bred lineage of older animals are from the Rain lineage. And we've talked about Rain, the animal that was produced by VPI a number of times on the podcast, but arguably the best looking barneck who ever lived. I think that animal is rivaled on a different level by one that Katie over in Ireland has, that was, I think, produced by a guy in Russia or Ukraine a year or 2 ago, that is just turning out to be absolutely mind-blowing, but that's an aside. But like a really kind of like a pale gold body, super light, with very defined banding, a bright tail, just super clean. And he was huge too. He was like a 14-foot long snake. So I have his daughter, and I have 2 grandchildren who are adults now. And they are some of those animals that were stunted from improper feeding when they were younger from the previous owner. So the male is like, and he's also stuck on birds, and scrub pythons don't, in my opinion, grow particularly well on birds. So he's approaching 7 years old, and he's like 6.5 feet long. And I think he's where he is. I don't think he's going to grow anymore. But with that said, he bred a female last year. The clutch just didn't amount to anything. So I'm good. You don't need to be huge. I don't need to spend extra money to feed you. I'm all right. So as long as you breed, you can be 6.5 feet and be a male. You just can't be that and be a female. His sister is like 7.5 feet. So, and she resembles the grandfather quite a bit, where him not quite so much. He's definitely still a beautiful snake, but not quite the extreme banding that all 3 grandsire, mother, and then sister all have. So like I said, we'll be attempting to breed the mother. This will be my 4th year trying to breed this snake, and I am gonna be sad if I can't get something. So we'll see. And and then obviously the younger animals, the male will go to probably a couple of my younger captive bred barnecks. I kind of have like two different tiers right now. I have like older adult animals and like wild caughts, and then like younger 2018 to 2022 raised up captive bred animals that kind of like fall into two different categories of the barnecks. But then other than that, I have a handful of wild caught females, one being my melanistic female, who is 95% solid black. And I had a clutch from her 2 years ago. I have offspring from a clutch of hers from 2019 that I did not produce, but I have some of the siblings now. And one of her offspring that is, she's a great pattern and almost kind of like an axanthic-y look to her. My hope is to breed her to the Rain grandson, and then produce F2 unrelated captive bred animals from two very distinctive and strong lineages. So that to me is like one of my most anticipated scrub pairings of the year. And I also want to get another clutch out of the dark female as well. I definitely am not one these days to acquire wild caught male or wild caught scrub pythons in general, especially like barnecks. But there was one animal that became available at the end of last year that is like the darkest male I've ever seen. And and he was very reasonably priced. So I got him for the sole purpose of trying to breed him to this female. And he's a little small. He's probably just shy of 7 feet. So I'm going to try with kind of medium hopes, and I'll be very quick to throw another male in with her if he doesn't get to it pretty much right away. But that would be great, because that would make probably the darkest captive bred barnecks that have ever been produced. So fingers crossed on that one. But then barnecks aside, I have an orange Highland pairing for this year.
I was wondering if you were going to do Highlands again. I like the look of those. Those are, I mean, I know this might sound crazy from working with your collection when I did. I very much prefer the Southern Amethystina over barnecks.
Sure.
I just think they look really cool, like the solid sort of uniform model pattern. Barnecks are awesome though. They are. I was wondering if you were new to Highlands, because something about the nice orange on the side. Those look great.
Yeah. So only one pairing to do for this year. But if it does work out, it'll be fully unrelated to my clutch that I had in 2022. So that'll be nice to have two unrelated captive bred lineages that I produced to raise up and then try to get F2s from. So that'll be nice. Definitely excited about that. To answer Brandon's question, hopefully ever, I don't know, far, I might have all males. I don't know. On Beox scrubs, that'll be the pipe dream for a long time. So not this year, that's for damn sure. Not this year, unfortunately. So then, other than barnecks, the one Highland pairing, I'll have a couple like Maruki, Tanamera Southern pairings as well. Not a lot though, and I'm kind of intentionally keeping those numbers low because a lot of them are bred from a lot of good people. So I just feel like cage space and time is probably best spent elsewhere. With that said, though, I do have a female that is kind of like anery axanthic looking, to where I've seen a few others with a similar phenotype, but it definitely doesn't seem to be as frequent as, say, Tannenbars or retics or something like that. So that'll be cool. She's definitely like a younger one that I've raised up, but she's about 8 feet long now. So I'll be attempting her. And then I may try to repeat the pairing on the Waminas, but if she isn't showing signs, I'm going to be very quick to just give her the year off, considering she had a perfect clutch last year and she had slugged out the year prior. But she put all the weight back on and looks great, and everything seems to be up and running with her. So that'll be just kind of a take it one step at a time project. And then last, but certainly not least, and I kind of left it last for a reason, will be if I don't have a clutch of Aru scrub pythons this year, I'm going to go into a deep, dark depression because this will be my 4th year I have been able to attempt them. And I have 4 adult females to deal with. So, shoot, I better get something. So, and I know that at least one of my males is a very willing breeder, and I've had locks all of the years, and I just have, for one reason or another, just hasn't worked out any of the times. So, that from an Amethystina standpoint, aside from a couple pairs of bar necks that are like going to be really spectacular, the Arus are absolutely my top priority from the Amethystina standpoint.
It's a lot of scrubs.
You're telling me. Yeah, I mean,
it's cool though. I mean, you're getting what you want even more dialed in now. Like, you know, to think, you know, there was probably a time where, I mean, imagine what you would have been telling yourself 4 years ago, just trying to have one successful clutch of scrubs, and now you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do some bar necks and some Arus and some islands. Like, it's cool, right? Like, it's all coming together. It's going to work, and having that vision for the future, that drive it's why you're still doing it.
Yeah, I mean, this will be my 5th year of breeding scrub pythons, and it's been a crazy ride. It really has been. From my first clutch, I didn't even know I had a pair until a few weeks before I put them together. When a snake that was sold to me as a female shed out massive sperm plugs, and I was like, oh, interesting. And you know, at the time, looking back morphologically, that snake was as male as a male can possibly get. But that's also part of the experience of, you know, I was still fairly new to keeping them and hadn't really kind of caught on to that yet. Yeah, I mean, when I had my clutch in 2020, I mean, I realistically, going into that year, I thought I was maybe 2 or 3 years away from breeding scrub python, or like trying to. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can do it now. And then I got a clutch, which was absolutely nuts. And then I got a repeat clutch from the same female the following year that ended up going bad. And then 3 clutches, 2 clutches, and then 6. So, you know, we'll see. But and then, so before this goes too far, so Lisa on the Tamika scrub, I think that's really just a matter of changing what we call certain things, because, and then exactly, like, are you referring to kind of like the darker Highland type orange lateral Tamika, like what you would look at, we would find on iNaturalist of like animals in that area, or just, I guess, what exactly do you mean by Tamika? Because there aren't many of those that, like, that phenotype I just described. There really aren't many of them in the States at all. And I would say the closest that we really have are some of the ones that are labeled oxabil that are being produced in Europe. So yeah, I mean, I probably not, honestly, probably not. I think, like I just said, I think our only hope on those is if eventually some of the European ones make it over here. So yeah, I don't know, because very very few of those have been brought over that I've seen. I think a lot of it is kind of the brighter orange, whatever Highland, however you want to describe those snakes, but the darker high contrast orange lateral Tamika type, so to speak. I wish I wish I had some of those, because those things are freaking incredible. Yeah, they are, and it's a shame we don't have them. But yeah, it's, to get back to the scrub topic. Yeah, it's crazy. It's been quite a learning process, and it'll be cool to finally. I mean, I'm fairly confident that it's, at least I'll be able to get a clutch this year sired by a male I produced. That'll be pretty freaking cool.
I sadly haven't gotten to that point yet with anything, but I've just been trying to buy up as much unrelated stock as I could. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean that's what I did, for a while, and especially on the barneck front. I have some projects that aren't quite as genetically diverse, but I mean I'll never need to. I may do some intentional half sibling or sibling pairings for the sake of phenotype and then outcrossing, but I'll never need to. Just from a genetic bank standpoint, I think I did the math one time and I can get to like 14 or 15 generations before I need to inbreed. So yeah, I'm that's pretty cool. So, but yeah, that's that on scrub pythons. So definitely a lot, but we'll see. I'm kind of taking it one season at a time.
Between them and the Colubrids, though, that's solid.
Yeah, and then that doesn't even take into account the Venomous yet as well, which is definitely more significant than Colubrids. And they're coming to the end of breeding season right now, for the rattlesnakes, at least in the palm vipers. The Mangshan vipers are kind of on the opposite schedule, at least to the best of my knowledge, as the palm vipers are, and the rattlesnakes. I've definitely had a good amount of breeding activity. Definitely don't want to like jinx it too soon, but I could definitely have a pretty solid amount of litters next year of at least rattlesnakes, maybe a palm viper litter. I hope so. But I couldn't guarantee it, although that would be freaking awesome to have more baby palm vipers. And then I'm going to be giving my best shot I can to the Mangshans, which we'll see. I last year with the move and everything, their cycle, at least in the way that I see it, was kind of messed up, and I just didn't get the cool down right, didn't do a lot of stuff right, and then moving from a humid Midwest climate to a really dry desert climate, I think they had the hardest time adapting, especially considering that their enclosures had some like side vents and stuff in it that was intended for the humid, environment, that I've had to close the vents off and stuff like that. I need to even fully seal the cage up, and I want to add foggers to the enclosures and, stuff like that. So
more ways to mimic that high elevation montane climate, which
right.
In a sense, the enclosure they're in, you can't as easily do.
Yes, exactly. So especially after seeing the enclosure at Reptilandia a couple of times, and it's very different than how I have mine set up for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's a big zoological display, but at the same time, there's some very practical applications from how they have their setup to what I can do with mine. So I'll be trying some new stuff. But yeah, that would be one of the top the pinnacles of the year for me. If I could even get a lock from the Mangshans, or infertile, anything, babies would be great, but just literally anything in the right direction would be pretty awesome, considering that I'm still just completely at ground level with them. So
that's how it starts, though. I mean,
it is
all part of the learning curve. I wish I had insight on that, but I've personally never kept nor worked with Mangshans. I volunteered at the Discovery Center when Rob had his, but
yeah,
I wasn't doing any hands-on work with that snake. So they're cool, though. They're very cool. I remember I was at I want to say it was a zoo in like Washington, D.C. They had theirs outdoors for a portion of the year. It was a really cool big setup. It was almost like an aviary, but they could get down into the 40s and stuff for that time of year. And
yeah, that's, to my knowledge, some of the people who have produced them in Europe do the same thing, where they have year-round indoor-outdoor enclosures. And I don't think they're necessarily going to be outside when it's snowing and freezing cold, but they have that influence. So might take some shaved ice from my fridge and just throw it in their enclosure in the middle of December or something like that.
who knows? It might get the job. Just even cooling that ambient air temperature enough.
Yeah,
You never
yeah.
know. To like when it gets colder, the pressure is going to change. So if you can align that with your winter in quotes that you get in Texas, I mean,
Yeah.
something's got to click for them, right? Like that's
Yeah, and I think one thing
gotta,
that's going to work in my favor is I'm at a higher elevation here, so you know they're obviously they're a very high elevation species, and I'm not nearly to the 6,000 to 8,000 feet or whatever where you're finding Mangshan vipers, but surely closer than I was in Indiana. So um, hopefully it'll help. So that's one of them that I'm going to be really trying hard for, and hopefully I can just take a step in the right direction on that project. That's really all I can hope for.
I mean, if Scott Blue can breed Bolins in Kansas, I think, right? That's where he's at, or where's he? Is he in Missouri? I don't.
Like that, yeah, great.
He's in the Midwest, like,
yeah.
And he broke everybody's. I had the pleasure to talk with him at the last NARBC show at Tinley, and yeah, everything he said, I was like, wow, this breaks everybody's rules, and he's so consistent with it. So yeah, Mangshans are another one of those oddball snakes. They're not easy. And sometimes I wonder too with species like that if you just have to adjust to how you do things. Like I was reading in Ari's book on Bolins, like how Keith McPeak did it. And he's like, yeah, compared to all the other pythons, they have their own room. It's cooler. It's different. And he was successful with them. And it's just sometimes quite literally the saying is you have to do what works for you. You know, if I were to try and I don't know, not that I intend to anytime soon, if I were to pick up a pair of scrub pythons from you and try and breed them, I guarantee you I would not have anywhere near the success if I tried to follow your recipe up here in Minnesota.
Sure. Oh yeah.
For you in Texas or when you were breeding them in Indiana. Like it's, I mean, same thing goes with the lizards I keep. My friend in Michigan always gets clutches before I do. It's just how that cycle works for them. They follow the routine similar to how I do it to a T pretty much. We both do the same thing. And yet she always gets eggs earlier than I do. And I have no idea why. It just works for her.
Yeah.
And that's the other reality of it is sometimes you have to know that you do not know,
Yeah.
So,
no, that is definitely true. And, reading your animals before you take the advice of others as gospel as well.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, that theory will definitely be tested hard for me with the Mangshans. Maybe Tim, I don't know. It's something I've thought about for sure, of having a bigger reptile show display with scrub pythons. I think it would be, if it seemed like it would be worthwhile to, where I am, I don't have a big show close to me. So, it's not like where I could drive an hour or 3 hours to Tinley Park previously, make a quick weekend out of it. I would want to make sure it'd be worth it to kind of haul around those snakes. But that definitely is something I would like to do. I'd love to have a reptile show display where I can have, a kind of a scrub rainbow, so to speak, of a few different localities, all a bunch of captive bred animals. That's definitely a goal of mine. I think it's more a matter of when that's kind of the most feasible, when it makes the most sense to do, and kind of when I think it'd be worth it to put the animals through that process. So, but yeah, definitely something I'd like to do. Maybe next year will be the time when that's more of a plausible thing. So we will see. But another thing that I wanted us to talk about before we get too deep into the conversation is some of your thoughts on incubation and how they've evolved over time. So I guess I'll kind of give you the floor to
transition. Talking about breeding, I'll be curious to hear I know when I've talked to you on the phone, you've talked about some things you've changed with scrubs. But yeah, incubation, I mean, obviously for species that lay eggs. Aside from like your rattlesnakes, you were saying, where you just sort of wait for a litter. The process of incubation is pretty important if you want to get stuff to, breed and be born or hatch. So
Yeah, probably.
yeah, so in my case, with these agamid lizards, agamids, however you pronounce it, some people like to do like the long A, like I've heard pustullatus and I've heard pustullatus, agamids and agamids, however you want to pronounce it. All words are technically made up, I guess. But regarding, at least from how I used to do egg incubation to now, is very different.
Okay.
I don't keep it a secret. So if I've said it before on other podcasts I've been on, I apologize if I'm repeating myself. My very first incubator was a old styrofoam box I had with a heat pad in it and a on-off thermostat.
Hell yeah.
Like breaking every traditional or modern, in quotes, incubation rule. And like I hatched 6-7 clutches. Yeah, I want to say actually 7 clutches of water dragons. Now I'm thinking about it. I've got it in my notes here too in front of me somewhere. But they like it worked. I tried different temperatures and experimented with it, but for the most part, I just always use soil from the nest box of the eggs to incubate them. Maybe spray it down, and then eventually I'd mix in some vermiculite, just because when you've only got 2 to 3 clutches in an incubator, you can peek on them once a week and take the time to spray them, rehydrate them, which was cool. Seeing them quite literally incubate in what the female would nest in. But the reality is eventually, if you're studying for classes, or I was working on and off at the local exotic shop by me in Illinois, sometimes you forget to do that. So by mixing in vermiculite or a substrate that would hold that moisture longer, they could go longer without it. I guess needing to add moisture, which is pretty much the idea of a majority of incubation methods, to my knowledge, is the longer you can go without messing with the eggs, that's typically what's best. And
Right.
So that's sort of where I've tried to transition my incubation. So at least, again, I'm only going to reference water dragons here. I'll highlight later on, I guess, what I'm going to intend to do with Hydrosaurus eggs if I get good sailfin eggs. But the reality is I've never successfully incubated sailfin eggs before personally. So I've got some ideas that I've been toying around with, but pretty much for the Chinese water dragons, something that I tried for the first time last year was incubating the eggs in a sim container.
Okay.
And that was an awesome experience. Like what John's done with the sim, it just takes, the guesswork out of it. You just put water or damp substrate underneath, and the egg osmoregulates through water vapor instead of direct contact with the substrate. So if you incubate eggs too wet, it means they actually take longer to incubate, because that egg has to slowly release that excess moisture since it's in direct contact with your substrate. Whereas when they're surrounded by water vapor, the process of them absorbing that, like the moisture from the air, is slower. And that's why people have noticed eggs do not dent when they're in a sim container before they hatch. Whereas typically if you incubate, at least with lizard eggs, don't know how it is for snake eggs. I should preface that. I have never incubated snake eggs in a sim before. But with the water dragon eggs, the one area I messed up with my incubation is I bought a new incubator, which is a forced air incubator. So, it's the fan at the top, blows it down the dip, and the air is constantly moving. Living in Illinois, our air is fairly dry. And I had also put vents in the sim container. So since that fan is constantly moving that warm, drier air around, that air is moving faster in and out of that sim container. And this was totally my fault. I'll admit it. John told me that I didn't need to add any ventilation holes in the container. I've always done a little bit of ventilation, and so I figured, well, if it's over water, it's going to be very humid. But the reality is since the egg was not in direct contact with a moist substrate, now all that dry air is moving through those vents and around the egg as a whole. And so I actually had fairly low hatching success on the first clutch. Then from talking with you, Stephen, I remember you said, like, when you've used the hotbacks, you have a whole tray of water in there. So I did that, and that seemed to help out for the second clutch last year. And so now the plan is this year is to just have I've literally added Scotch tape around all the ventilation holes I had in my old Sims, and I've just taken a thumbtack and I've put one hole, and then I have a tray of water inside this incubator.
Okay.
That after doing some of these tests, I can get it to 100% humidity in there. One thing that I also think I messed up with this incubation technique is that I was very worried about the fact of temperature stabilization in these forced air incubators, because at the end of the day, the air, as soon as you open that incubator, all that escapes, right? It's not like, say, the old school, even with my styrofoam, ghetto setup, I had water bottles on the bottom. So the heat pad, in a sense, it was like a Zoom Ed heat pad would turn on. It was very unsafe now that I look back on it, because there's the heat pad and there were water bottles on top of it. I mean, all that thing had to do is spark, and there, total fire hazard. But the point is, I put water bottles all on the bottom of the incubator where the air comes out. So one thing I noticed is by having that tray of water in there, there was so much condensation on the front. And I was sketching this out literally last week. This is when I came to this revelation. Quite exciting. And in a sense, what I believe was happening, yes, thank you for catching that. The air was going into the fan, it goes down the false wall, and when it pushed out, it would hit the water bottle, and then it just moves up. So the back of the incubator would be at the set temperature, right? I incubate water dragon eggs at around 82, 83 degrees. And then the front of the incubator would not have as much of that air being moved forward. And so all that condensation builds up because there's already a massive temperature gradient now in the incubator, which you don't want. There's condensation in my sim containers, which I had seen an old video from a guy on YouTube. He was a frilled dragon breeder, but he did a tour of a Dragna's place. And John said the best way to avoid condensation in the sim container, have your incubator in a warm room, and you want to have a really well insulated incubator. I was doing the exact opposite of that. I had this incubator in my basement at 72 degrees, water, the water bottles are blocking that air from moving around the eggs. It was just a nightmare. And that's why I think part of it was I had that really bad first clutch from the dry air in the incubator, and then the second clutch was sort of lower. Part of it, I think, could have been the age of my female too, but I really think I just totally messed up the incubator setup there. So what I'm doing now is I have no water bottles at the bottom.
Okay.
And that way that air goes all the way through, right? So now it's moving all the way to the front, going up the front of the incubator, going up the back. In a sense, I'm allowing that fan to just push that air all throughout before it cycles up. And then what I did is I took that tray of water and I actually put it on one of the shelves. So now that air is moving under the tray of water and moving around it. And the incubator is in my lizard room now. So quite literally, I mean, that lizard room will hit the low 80s during the day or in the 70s. And after running some tests for the past 2 weeks, that incubator is at 100% humidity. There is zero condensation forming on the acrylic door, because I'd imagine it's in the warm room, so the water doesn't feel the need to build up against the door. And I've got a sim in there that I filled with water. I've got a sim in there that I filled with vermiculite, and then I even have like a standard container where I put the eggs in the vermiculite, and no condensation on those because they're now at a much stable temperature, and the humidity inside the incubator is the same as that humidity inside the egg box, which I'd imagine is as close to 100% as possible, which is what you want.
Yeah.
So I took notes on that. Everything I just said is what I plan to do for next year as long as I get eggs, and we're going to see what happens.
Okay.
So that's the big thing. And 82 to 83 degrees for the water dragons. So fingers crossed.
Will it be the same on the sail fins?
So that's the other internal debate I'm having with myself is everybody who's incubated sail fins, most notably Scott Corning, who's been breeding them for like the past 30 years. He literally throws his eggs in a closet with a ceramic heat emitter that turns on during the day and turns off at night. They have a night drop. So what I did is I swapped out the incubator that I had, it's the hot box. It comes with a VE stat. I switched that for a herb stat. So on top of doing the test to make sure that the temperature and the humidity is stable in the incubator, I've been setting. I literally have used probably every feature imaginable on this dang herpstat. You know how they come with all those features that nobody uses?
Yes.
I am for once the customer that's probably using it. And so quite literally, I have put a night drop on this thermostat to 79.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And the only reason it's that specific is because for the sake of my data collection, that's 26.5 degrees Celsius for the nighttime temperature. And then I have a 3-hour ramping period where
Okay.
it slowly raises from 79.7 to 84.2, which would be 29 degrees Celsius. So that way for 8 hours a day, you have that high of 84, which is a little bit warmer than what I normally like for water dragons.
Mm.
And typically, from what I've heard, 84 to 85 consistently for sailfins, you sometimes get kinked babies.
Okay.
However, when I visited Scott, he temp gun his closet. He's like, oh, I guess it's 85 today. He's like, it'll only be like that for a few hours and then it'll drop at night. So I figured if it's just below 85, or heaven forbid this herpstat is off by a degree, then they're exposed to 85 for 8 hours and then it'll drop down 4 degrees. And there's a guy in France that incubated Hydrosaurus microlophus like that with an on-off thermostat.
Mm.
So his would just turn on and go straight up to 84. It stayed at 84 for 8 hours, and it would turn off to be around 79 at night.
Okay.
And they went, 95 days, which is about the average. Casey Schultz hatched Hydrosaurus celebensis last year, and hers went 90 days at just straight 82, 83 degrees.
Okay.
So I feel like that'll probably work for the water dragons. We're just going to find out. Part of me was almost tempted to see if at this Tinley I could snag like a 24-inch hot box incubator just to have that one at a constant temp for water dragons or do something. But
sure.
Reality is I won't lie. I've incubated water dragon eggs as low as 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've incubated them as high as 86. So part of me is just kind of tempted to throw them in there with that night drop.
Yeah.
And I feel like they'll hatch,
I think so.
And an interesting point too is like you follow. I know you had him Philip Leeds, right? Arizona. So he brought up a point on one of his episodes of Project Herpeticulture, and I guess he had a Patreon post about it. I saw it on his story, and he said it was sort of this idea of like moving the needle. And he was referring specifically to his method of egg incubation, where there's probably just a wide range of conditions that eggs can tolerate. And as long as they're exposed to that during incubation, they're going to hatch one way or another. Some might be longer, some might be shorter. And so the fact that Scott Corning, one of my mentors, I should say, Casey Schultz has been another big mentor to me on sailfins. Scott's preached the night drop. He's hatched sailfins for 30 years. Casey has hatched sailfins without a night drop. And I should have specified when I said 82 to 83 for what she did last year, it was 83 during the day and she dropped it a degree at night. And she still hatched sailfins. I also know Scott, when he was breeding Australian water dragons, he threw his Australian water dragon eggs in the same closet as his sailfin eggs. Australian water dragons, phylogenetically speaking, are pretty damn close to Chinese water dragons. And then anecdotally, with my experience having incubated Chinese water dragons at literally over a 10-degree difference of temperatures and hatching babies, I'd like to think that they're probably going to hatch with a 4-degree night drop in the mid-80s.
Yeah.
Hypothetically. I haven't done it yet, though. So for all I know is next year I'll have eggs and I'm going to kill every single one of them and it's going to suck, but it'll be a learning experience.
I doubt you will.
I hope so too. So yeah, that's my plan for eggs. And that's how my incubation has changed. How about you?
Definitely don't have it perfect yet. I have a few incubators and it's kind of on a basis of I need that for the sake of having different species in with different requirements. Colubrid incubation will definitely be an interesting one. I'm almost kind of tempted just to have some especially during like the warmer months, just put them in containers out in my house, especially downstairs during the summer. Probably looking at like 77, 78 at night and like 80 to 82 during the day. So pretty much right where you need it to be for a lot of colubrid species. But then I have one big incubator for my scrub pythons, and I think I need to make some modifications on it before I get eggs, where I think I need to reseal the door and reseal an area where probes and cords come out, because I couldn't keep the main chamber humid enough last year. Like if it was reading over 70% in the main chamber, I was happy. And I just think I need that number to be higher. And then I have some sim containers, and I had to do some makeshift sim containers, and everything that I had in the makeshift containers, I ended up running into most of them. I ran into issues with. So, and then the ones that I had, I put right in the sim containers that were good clutches from the start. That they just all did just fine. So I definitely want to kind of continue doing that. But what I've been doing for a couple of years now, and when I visited Socrates down in Florida, he was doing this with his sim containers, and I was like, yeah, it's a great idea, is using the water crystals instead of just water, so that when you're moving them around and whatnot, you're not getting that sloshing, but you're still getting that same 100% humidity effect, especially if you mix them properly. And they stay kind of like constituted the way that you want them to. So you're like, I've never added water to a container that has water crystals in it. And especially in the sim containers, it definitely maintains that level of humidity that you want. So I'm a big fan of using the water crystals in the sim containers for that reason, because I've used straight water in them before, and you have to be so careful when you're moving the containers around, and one misstep and it sloshes up, and now the grate itself is wet, and you're pulling the eggs out and you're drying everything off. And I just, I want to be able to avoid messing with shit as much as I can. Another thing that I've been with the scrub pythons back and forth on now for a couple of years is leaving egg masses together or separating the eggs out. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do this year. So the first clutch that I had, I left them all together and they all hatched. Perfect hatch rate, full fertility, great. The second clutch that I had, which all went bad, the first sign of something not being right was that the eggs from the jump did not adhere to each other whatsoever. So as soon as I pulled the female out, they all just kind of rolled around. I'm like, oh, that's not supposed to be that way. So then the following season, I had 3 clutches and I separated all the eggs out. And really they did fine. I had a pretty high hatch rate that year. I didn't have a ton of eggs, but I hatched most of them. And then the following year, I did the same, where I separated a bunch of eggs, or separated both the clutches out. But I had a lower hatch rate, to where I had a clutch of 15 and a clutch of 16. Of the clutch of 15, I got 12. And of the clutch of 16, I only got 6 to hatch. So I attribute that a lot more to basking temperatures and gestation than I do to incubation in hindsight with that female. But at the time, I thought maybe the separating of the eggs and then also a warmer incubation temperature may have caused an issue there. For that third year, I raised my temperatures, where when I had the second year, the second clutch go all the way bad, I decided to raise my temperatures a little bit. And the babies hatched sooner. They were a little bit smaller, not quite as robust as in the past. They all ended up doing just fine, but some of them were kind of slower starters. So then last year, I dropped my temperatures again to kind of where I had them for my first year, where I had the perfect clutch. And then I ran into a bunch of issues that were kind of non-incubation related. And the babies all hatched out bigger, more robust. They took longer. Some took a really long time. So I think I'm going to probably raise my temperatures like 0.3 degrees, maybe. Have them kind of sit between 86 and 86 and a half. I know somebody in the UK who's bred scrub pythons a handful of times, and he hatched a clutch out one year that I think he had some issues with his incubator, and they ended up getting into the 90s for a majority of incubation, and everything went fine. They hatched at like day 60. They hatched like ball python
Really?
times. And he said that the babies were all fine. They all ate. They did, no kinks or anything crazy. So it seems like they really can incubate at a pretty wide range of temperatures. I would say, like, realistically, you could probably incubate scrub eggs between like 84 and 90. And what's the best? I'm not really sure. So I think probably like 86.5 is what I'll roll with this year, where I was like right around 86, if not like 85.8.9 last year, and just kind of see what happens. But then I need to seal up that incubator better, because I think I was losing humidity just from little gaps, and then more sim containers, because those things are fucking awesome. But then subsequently, well, not subsequently, but on the other side with the Colubrid eggs, the only clutch that I had last year was my Mexican pines. And I caught the clutch, I think, a good bit after she laid them. And for some reason, the eggshells were they were thinner than they had been in her previous clutch. They're delicate. So when I was trying to separate some of them out, I did suspended incubation with them, and I think that caused some problems. When I was trying to separate them, I actually popped one of the eggs. And not just like a little pop, like it literally like split in half. I saw the embryo just like sitting in the egg. I'm like, oh gosh. So I just stopped touching them at that point. She laid 16 eggs. That one obviously was no good at that point. And then throughout the remainder of incubation, 2 more of them popped from the pressure of eggs that were on top, and I think from the grate being below. So I lost 3 eggs that were completely fertile and really should have hatched. So I think this year with my colubrids, I'm going to probably go to a 50-50 vermiculite perlite mixture, and then just submerge into the bedding to avoid anything like that happening. And then kind of depending on what the egg mass looks like, either leave them together or separate them out a little bit. But I think that's how I'm going to go with my colubrids. And like I said, I might even just do ambient incubation in the house. So we'll see. So
that's interesting you say the pressure, though, because like if you scrub python eggs, you'd think that would be where the pressure is with how big those are, I'd imagine, on the sim grid.
Yeah.
And I guess like the ecology of the snake's reproduction, colubrids kind of just lay their eggs on the ground somewhere and say adios, whereas like, a scrub, those eggs have the pressure of each other and mom around them. So you gotta wonder if, like,
she laid quite a pile. I mean, there were definitely parts of her stack where there were like 3 vertical high.
Oh wow.
That were adhered together. Yeah, it was a big perfect clutch, and she mounted them up high. I was surprised about how high she mounted them. Because the other colubrids that I've bred before, definitely not that way. Definitely like a flatter, kind of more spread out mass where the female didn't really wrap them. She was kind of there where I have a picture of her fully wrapped around the clutch, kind of like a python a little bit. It was very interesting. So yeah, I think I'm definitely going to tweak both colubrid and python incubation in kind of in opposite ways. But on that topic of the what happened with that egg, I think I had the same thing happen with the scrub egg last year, where I had a pile that I left together in a sim where it also had the pressure from below. An egg that was completely covered by other eggs that had gone bad during incubation, and then I had to go through the delicate process of separating it from the clutch like a month over a month into incubation. And that's kind of why I'm potentially leaning back towards separating these eggs out. Scrub pythons, more than other pythons, seem to like good eggs seem to go bad from bad eggs. And just for the sake of pulling that bad egg as soon as it's looking bad, I might go back to separating all the eggs out. So I don't know. I probably will just take it one clutch at a time. And like if I have a clutch that was laid in a pretty good beehive, but I'm candling infertile eggs and stuff like that, then just fully pull that one apart from the jump. If I have ones that look perfect, where there isn't like one egg that's going to have too much pressure in particular on it or whatnot, then I might leave that one be. So I don't know. I think I'll probably just play it by ear once the time comes, but I'm definitely indecisive on that front.
Just start taking notes, and kind of like what we mentioned earlier, how you're figuring things out with the Mangshans and some of your other difficult breeders. You'll just figure out the incubation. I mean, you're hatching scrub pythons. So like you have a base recipe, and now you're at the point of refinement, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
All that is, a year from now, maybe we'll be having another conversation like this, sharing what you've learned, and then other people. I mean, that's the beauty of the podcast platform for talking about reptiles is, on one hand, I definitely think it gets me a little paranoid with stuff because I'm like, oh shoot, I have to change everything I'm doing. But on the other hand, like being able to hear everybody's thoughts without having to drive to an expo. If you can't make, say there's a scrub python guy, in, I don't know, Florida, and you can't make it to Florida for a show.
There definitely isn't a python guy in Florida anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I guess Somalia's, I'm, in another state aside from Texas that you can't communicate with frequently, or, like you can hear their thoughts or.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Whenever I hear, granted I co-hosted when you had Casey, but hearing Casey on different episodes, just hearing her insight, it helps me, it teaches me, and, hopefully I'll be, like I said, hatching sailfins on my own as she's done. Yeah. So it's just great ways to share information. And again, sort of share even the thought process of us as individual keepers, refining our techniques to, further keeping these animals around in the hobby that we love.
Absolutely. Well, I think that calls for us to book the show for 1 year from today, 2026 pre-breeding season.
Okay.
Yeah, everything has changed. You put it in the calendar.
I'm doing it right now. Let's see. Okay, October.
Alex, what is the first Wednesday of October of 2025? I'm unaware.
That would be Wednesday, October 1st. So a year from yesterday.
All right. Well, in 364 days, we will see.
There you go. For everybody watching. Oh, shoot. My green screen. Podcast with Steve and Kush set for October 1st, 2025.
I have to imagine that's not the next time we'll be seeing you on here, but I'm glad we have that one penciled in. So
hopefully the next time I'm on here, I'll actually be hatching some stuff. Oh man, that'd be great. But who knows?
Is there anything else you think we should cover before we wrap up around here?
I've got nothing. I'm honestly, this conversation has made me really excited for next year. Not like just being able to sort of speak my thoughts and ideas, especially with incubation and, even at the start talking about cycling, I've got like I guess being able to talk about it, a better idea of what I'll be doing, and we're just gonna hope for the best.
I feel like it always helps. You can think about stuff endlessly, but actually putting it into words, it's like you're hearing yourself actually say it. Kind of registers a little bit better, I feel like.
Definitely, yeah, and hopefully it'll be a good water dragon breeding here, and like I said, maybe some sailfins.
Yeah, definitely some sailfins. Well, cool, man. Thank you for your time tonight. And again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, thank you for doing this on such short notice. Definitely bailed me out because I don't know if anyone wanted to hear a back-to-back solo episode, especially with one where I had no topic. So that might not have been the best.
Just great talking reptiles. And hopefully everybody that's listened to this episode hasn't minded my blabbling about cool and uncommon and gamid lizards.
They've been here the whole time, so they must have enjoyed it at least to some degree. But so for anyone who wants to keep up with everything that you're doing, or to kind of keep an eye on you for baby sailfins and water dragons, where can they find you?
That would just be Facebook and Instagram. My pages are at Alex's Agamids, and then I haven't been posting on there a ton lately because my work life has just been keeping me busy on top of the move. And then if I have stuff available, honestly, you'll just reach out. Feel free to shoot me a message on there. I try to respond to all my messages, even if I haven't posted for a couple months at a time. I swear I have like the app that lets me check that. And then email is honestly the faster way to reach me because I check my email multiple times a day. So that would be hydrosorine @gmail.com. That's the subfamily for the sailfin lizards. So go on Wikipedia, find that, and then just add @gmail.com. And I can answer all questions and ideally, take care of you if you want to buy a water dragon in the future if I've got some available. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool, man. Well, once again, thank you for your time tonight. I'm going to close this out real quick. But yeah, this was an awesome conversation. I'm very glad we were able to get it done.
Thanks, man.
All right. Appreciate it, man. All right, everybody. That is it for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in live or after the fact. For all of us here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, please subscribe on YouTube. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio content from. And not only is this show, Kush'S Korner, here every Wednesday, but there is a new episode of a list of different podcasts on the Trap Talk Reptile Network live every single day of the week. So there's never a shortage of the highest quality reptile-related podcast content available to you on the channel. For me personally, you can find me at Scrub Shepherd on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook at Stephen Kush. For anyone on Facebook who enjoyed the Scrub Python talk tonight, please join the Somalia Facebook group. It is a small community that we have started over there to talk about all things Scrub Pythons. Everyone who's breeding them these days is involved in the group, and lots of great keepers as well. And people who are not quite yet Scrub Python keepers, but are interested in learning everything they can about them beforehand. Definitely is a very inclusive community. We don't bully, we don't gatekeep, we don't do any of that dumb shit that the reptile community likes to do sometimes. So if you are interested in Scrub Pythons, please check out that group. But with all of that said, this has been an episode. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see everyone back here next week.